Tanzeen Sheikh, Sana Mohammed, Pauline Kilkenny, Katerina Pazek, Maureen Watkins, Jacqueline Allen, Samantha Gosney, Karen Cleary Brown, Barbara Finlay, Grace Milane, Maureen Whale, Sally Cavender, June Knight, Poppy Davy Waterhouse.
If somebody said to me, when was the last time you cried? I would actually probably find it quite hard to think of when that was. Now, if anybody did ask me, it would be, this morning, lunchtime, walking around Bath in my lunch break, driving home in the evening, going to bed, any of those. So, I'm completely different. On that 14th of December, I mean, I was notified at 4:20 that day, and the police had been called to the flat at 8:50 that morning. That still is very difficult to realise that we were all just carrying on with our day while all that was happening. When I was initially told, I thought there was one stab wound, and there'd been some sort of argument. And then in the evening, another police officer came up and said, I don't know what you've been told, and then she said the word multiple. And I remember now just taking a massive breath in, just absolutely freezing, and like forgetting to breathe back out again, because that was it. And we didn't know how many. And I think maybe at that point I was probably thinking half a dozen, And then it wasn't till a couple of days later we were told 23 stab wounds, and then that formed part of 49 knife wounds.
Amy Parsons, Mirakan Mustafa, Henriette Shush, Emma Folds, Lauren Griffiths, Ellie Gould.
Poppy died December 2018, and then in May the 3rd, Ellie Gould was murdered. Yeah, you view life very differently. You don't trust people either. You always wonder if there's another side to them. And I don't know, you're trusting human nature, and I don't know, it's gone, it's changed. You try and get up every morning and function, focus, but happiness is just tarnished now. I can't imagine a time where I will feel completely carefree and like I have no worries in the world again. I can't imagine that ever coming back. Everything we do, every experience, every holiday we might have in the future, I think will always be tinged with sadness. And it goes back to that's our life sentence. That's what we have to live with now because of the actions of one person. So eventually I drove over to see Carol in February, beginning of February 2nd or something like that. And we just hugged and shook our heads as if, we don't know each other. And all of a sudden we belonged to this club that we didn't know existed, we didn't want to belong to, and we were right in the middle of it.
Sowed Bilaha, Anne Turner, Nataya Elliott Cleverly, Rosemary Tinton, Ranjit Gill, Helen Joy, Emma Robertson, Nicole Anderson.
A domestic homicide is two people that are known to each other, either, have been in a relationship together or are like family members who, are known rather than strangers. And in a way, that's what makes it worse.
Jane Monckton Smith has done a lot of research and has found there's sort of 8 stages where people will move from a normal relationship into one where it can end in homicide. If we look at Poppy's murderer, he moved very quickly through the stages. There wasn't anyone that could spot that that it was going to happen. Atkinson, as other domestic homicide murderers, went and chose the knife. He chose the weapon that he thought would do what he intended to do. So this idea that there's no premeditation, he had to walk to another room, choose the knife, go back. We are quick-thinking human beings. It takes us a nanosecond to decide to do something. Make a sandwich, open the fridge, take the milk out. No, I don't want that one. It takes no time at all. At any point, he could have
stopped. I mean, he strangled her and she fell to the floor unconscious. He could have stopped. He could have taken his hands off her neck and he could have called for help.
He could have not picked the knife up. He could have just had an argument. He could have thrown a few bags out the door.
That wasn't enough. He was angry. He then picked up the knife and stabbed her 13 times in the neck.
He chose the knife, he went back, and he chose to use it. He followed her, he carried on. He pulled her on the floor, he carried on. He chose to carry on until she stopped moving.
And then he just walked out of this house after he'd put the knife back into her neck to make it look like she'd killed herself.
And then he decided to clean it. Then he decided to get another knife and put it by her hand.
He washed the knife to get his DNA off it. He wiped around a bit. He washed his shoes in our sink.
Then he decided to lie about it. And then he decided he hadn't even done a crime.
He even went to the extent of putting Ellie's finger on her phone when she was dead to use her fingerprint to open up the phone to stop her friend coming to pick her up and take her to school. And the punishment for that is just 12 and a half years.
Linda Maggs, Carol Smith, Sophie Moss, Christina Rowe, Suzanne Hannaby, Michelle Lizanek, Vyaslora Mesjuarska, Judith Rayard.
When we realised that a 10-year-old is treated the same as somebody a day off their 18th birthday, that was the first thing we unravelled. And I remember thinking, that's ridiculous. How can you treat a 10-year-old the same as, a teenager? And as time goes on, then you unravel another layer and think, oh, that's ludicrous as well. The 10-year gap where a murder takes place, whether it's in a home or in a street. You could stab somebody once in the park and they could be rival gangs that are fighting over a drugs patch and they could stab each other once, yet that crime will be seen as 10 years more serious than a woman that is killed violently in the home.
The campaign has mainly been seen as in 2 sections, the youth sentencing and then the adult sentencing, although they are very heavily linked.
It's a fight for justice. It's channeling that anger. It's making those politicians sit up and listen. And you sit in front of them and they look at you with these big sad eyes and say, oh, it's terrible, terrible crime, terrible loss, terrible this. But then they are so slow to react to it. So yeah, initially I was campaigning for a sliding scale. A 17-year-old now will serve 90% of the adult sentence. So that's an improvement. So that means now that somebody like Griffiths would have a starting point of 14 years. The adult starting point is 15 years. Still woefully inadequate.
What's still left is the adult sentencing, and at the moment it's a minimum term tariff of 25 years if you take a weapon to use somewhere, and the minimum starting tariff is at 15 years if the weapon is already at the scene of the crime. And obviously with domestic homicides, the majority of the cases are in the home and the kitchen is full of weapons. Quite often, majority of cases, a knife is used. The government used the word serious, the seriousness of a crime. Well, I think most compassionate human beings would say that somebody who is stabbed dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times in the home, that's as serious as somebody who is stabbed once or twice in a park.
The end goal is to change this disparity in sentencing, this 10-year disparity, and to bring sentencing for domestic homicide to be on par with any other homicides. Ultimately, I'd like that bit to be called Poppy's Law. If a starting point for an adult can be moved from 15 to 25 years, then the rest of it falls into place. And that's when they can call the sliding scale and the removal of the review Ellie's Law.
Anna Oskiankova, Tina Eyre, Katie Simpson, Benelyn Burke and her 2-year-old daughter, Samantha Heap, Geeta Goyal, Imogen Boyazjuk, Beijing Zhu.
The hardest thing is missing her, seeing her friends, seeing them go forward in their lives, trying to imagine maybe what Ellie would have done. Yeah, it's that loss. That never seeing her grow up and become an independent woman, that never seeing her maybe walk down the aisle, have her own children, and never seeing her again. Yeah, really hard.
There has been much debate over what I would say at the end of the list. Her name rings out across all of our media. We have all prayed that the name of Sarah Everard would never be on any list. Let's pray every day and work every day to make sure nobody's name ends up on this list again.
You are the voice of your loved one. You are the voice of the victim. You knew that person better than anybody else. And if you want to say something, or you know something and you think it's worth saying or telling somebody or talking about, then you must try and find the strength to do it, however difficult.
Now is the time to make the changes. And our girls will be remembered for the wrong reasons, but won't have died in vain. And Jess Phillips read out 117 women that were killed over the last year. There'll be 117 families grieving, like Julie and I. And if we can do nothing else, we can get justice for them. We can get justice for the 2 women that will be killed next week, and the week after, and the week after that. And I hope that will be the changes that we can make.